Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
5:07, it's Tuesday. It's the day of the vice presidential debate that'll be broadcast on CBS News. I'm using quotation marks with my fingers. You'll hear that, though, right here on WMAL. So don't give CBS News your clicks. Check in here at WMAL. You'll listen to the greatest pre-debate prep from Mark Levin, the great one, and then you'll hear the debate right here. By the way, speaking of Mark Levin, tomorrow's Rosh Hashanah, which means for Mark Levin will be. We used to call it Rosh Homa, because all of our Jewish coworkers would have to get home before sunset.
Russia.
Is that
perfect.
wrong? Can we? Is that?
I like it.
Anyway, I'm sitting in for Mark Levin tomorrow night for Rosh Hashanah,
are
and
you?
here's my plan. I'm going to tell a bunch of Jewish jokes because they're not listening. It's going to be fantastic.
Larry,
so tune into. No, should I not?
Don't do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Coming up at 6:35, Alana Goodman's joining us with Washington Free Beacon with a great investigative report proving that Tim Walz lied about being in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square. I wonder if that'll come up in the debate tonight. 7:05, Grover Norquist, Americans for Tax Reform. 7:35, our buddy Beverly Hallberg will be joining us, media coach. And then at 8:05, Corey Lewandowski, senior Trump campaign advisor. Always a good conversation with Corey. That's Julie Gunlock admonishing me for a joke. I'm not going to tell Jewish. In fact, what Jewish jokes? There's nothing humorous about our Jewish brothers and sisters.
Let's move on.
Two rabbis walk into a bar. Bartender is a former mohel. So here's the problem with really good Jewish jokes. Only Jewish people understand them.
Right.
In fact, I've heard them from Jewish comedians. And again, they won't be listening, so I'm going to have to come up with another plan. I'm sure there'll be something in the news to talk about. Like yesterday when Donald Trump visited Georgia. Donald Trump, now, unlike the president of the United States, unlike the vice president of the United States, Donald Trump actually went and visited one of the areas absolutely ravaged by Hurricane Helene. And I want you to first listen to how CNN covered Donald Trump visiting Georgia.
He is being treated not just as a former president, but almost as though he is a sitting president. As Boris, you just noted, getting a briefing from FEMA, getting a briefing from the National Guard. That is not something that is typically just offered to a candidate. They are treating him as though he is a former president who is there to help. And one.
This is Kristen Holmes, CNN national correspondent. Listen to the tone in the voice.
I know.
She's so indignant.
Appalled.
How dare they?
What?
Thing that I had noticed earlier during our 1 p.m. conversation was that Donald Trump did not have that much to offer in terms of resources since he is not a sitting president. But I will note.
Listen to that. You know, what's he doing here? He doesn't have anything. He doesn't have the treasury of the federal government.
Right.
Which, by
Yeah.
the way, he still brought a
Which,
ton
by the
of
way,
stuff.
someone does have the access to those resources,
Right.
and they're not bringing it
No,
either.
they're not.
Okay?
They were on the beach.
Right.
Or they were at a fundraiser.
Yeah.
Note that he and the campaign say that they have arrived in that area with trucks full of supplies that they plan on giving out. So there is something there for them to offer. He also.
He's like, well, I guess they have something. A few
Something.
trucks worth. It's like, well,
Yeah.
why begrudge him that?
Yeah, and there are some independent individuals like our friend Robbie Starbuck, okay,
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
others who are literally rushing out, going to different stores, buying Starlink, and then driving it around to different areas
To connect people.
To
yeah.
connect people. I mean, people are doing this stuff privately without the help of the federal government because there has been a delay in the response.
And by the way, something you won't hear on CNN, first that report that they're trucking in Starlink so that people can get connected
Right.
and communicate with their loved ones. Starlink would already be there if Joe Biden's partisan FCC hadn't revoked a
Right.
deal that was made with Elon Musk company because they think Elon's icky
Right.
because he likes free speech and allows people to say what they want on Twitter. So if they hadn't blocked that, I think there was something like scheduled 14,000 Starlink dishes to be installed at homes in western Kentucky, North Carolina.
Meanwhile, they spent billions of dollars. They allocated billions of
$42
dollars.
billion.
And nothing.
Not one person has been connected to
Right.
broadband. Yeah, that said, I mean, again, we play CNN reports for you just so you can hear what they say, and then we'll actually inject facts into the report. But a little bit more from Kristen Holmes.
So said that he had a tanker truck full of gasoline, which obviously, if you've ever covered one of these storms, you understand that one of the first things and hardest things to come by is gasoline. So he said that he was going to be giving that out. He is clearly taking this seriously as a politician, on the ground trying to show that he is there in support of the people on the ground in Georgia.
All right, so that's CNN's report on this, right? But by the way, speaking of Elon Musk, speaking of Starlink, this did not make it into the CNN report. But here is Donald Trump on the ground in Georgia.
I spoke to Elon. I'm getting him. We want to get Starlink hooked up because they have no communication whatsoever. And Elon will always come through. We know that. And so we're working on that, getting them hooked up. They asked me whether or not that would be possible. And we're going to try and get the Starlink in there as soon as possible because they have no communication.
All right, so he's coordinating directly with Elon Musk to try to get Starlink to, and SpaceX, I guess, is a subdivision of Starlink, to get these things shipped in there.
Interesting moment there. Think about it. He didn't say, I'm calling FEMA,
right,
or I'm calling the FCC, or I'm calling Department of whatever. He said, I'm calling my buddy Elon. I think that is such a fascinating thing. As someone who has worked in federal disaster response and on the Hill, this is just so out of the ordinary.
Right.
To not go, I'm calling the folks at FEMA, or
right,
I'm calling the folks at DHS. It's like, no. I'm going to the guy who actually produces these.
And can solve problems.
And always does.
And meanwhile, Kamala Harris did exactly that. She went to the FEMA headquarters. Right. She gave a 5-minute written statement, didn't go off script, didn't take questions, had a photo op sitting at a table, kicked the media out of the room, and that was it. And
Larry, we talked about it this morning. I mean, the sort of look on her for this sort of regal
arrogance.
You're allowed to come in.
Right.
View me at the head of the table, and then please exit to the right.
Take your pictures and video of me sitting at the head of the table so I can get that image out, but don't dare ask me anything. And I'm just going to... She literally lifted her nose and turned away from reporters as they were trying to shout questions to get information out.
Meanwhile, Trump is talking to anybody who will talk to him.
That's right. Well, in fact... here's a little bit more of Trump talking about trying to hook up the good people of Odessa, Georgia.
And throughout the region, our hearts are with you, and we are going to be with you as long as you need. It's called an hour of need. You're in our prayers, and we pray to God. And throughout the long weeks that lay ahead, you're going to have a lot of work, but the end result is it's going to be good. We just wish so many people weren't so badly hurt, and in many cases, sadly, no longer with us.
All right. So that's Trump on the ground in Georgia. You heard how CNN presented it, which, I mean, even though they were sneering through it, they were saying, listen, he's acting like the sitting president. They're treating him as though he's the sitting president. He's taking it seriously.
But you're right. But the report is like, what is wrong with him? He's acting like the sitting president, and they're treating him like the sitting.
They're treating him like with respect and everything.
But the truth is, that's exactly what happened.
That's exactly what happened. So in a moment, I want you to hear how CBS News covered it. It's interesting because it was basically anti-Trump propaganda. But even more interesting, CBS News is the outlet who will be hosting tonight's vice presidential debate because, there are impartial moderators, CBS News is. You'll hear that in just a moment.
WMAL. Making sense of the news.
Live
from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
All right, so Donald Trump dares to go down and look presidential and act presidential and be treated presidentially by the people of Georgia and by FEMA representatives and actually deliver some good news to the people who are devastated there. While Joe Biden hides in the White House from coming off the beach, Kamala Harris does a photo op without answering any questions at FEMA after coming from a multi-gajillion-dollar fundraiser in California.
The behavior of some of these politicians, also Tim Kaine, he tweeted out yesterday, he's on vacation. He's hiking. I mean, while there's devastation.
It's National Parks Day. Let's enjoy
National
the
Parks
outdoors.
Day.
It's like, there's
and
people swimming out of their wrecked
just don't
homes.
Post the picture. What is wrong with you, right? And you think about, can you imagine if it were a Republican and he's sitting on the beach?
Well, all of that is ripe for criticism. But CBS News ignored all of that.
Of course.
And instead, here was their report on Donald Trump in Georgia.
We're in Valdosta, Georgia. This is where Donald Trump spoke today as part of his campaign stop here in this battleground state. Valdosta, Georgia, was right there in the crosshairs of Hurricane Helene. The damage at the business behind me is reflective of what we see in lots of different parts of this city, where power is going to be out through Saturday through much of this city. Schools are closed. It's hard to find gas, food. It's hard for people to get stable footing right now in their hometown. Let me show you around this area. This business has just a whole sea of bricks and debris outside of it. You can get a good look here. They may have cleared that little space where you see an empty circle. That's where Trump spoke today. They put up a podium and a loudspeaker system. All these tractor trailers you see behind me, these were used to help secure the event by Secret Service to help protect the former president as he spoke in the open air.
So he's showing all of the, what was brought in to accommodate the former president for his campaign stop. Oh, look, they cleared this area for him to stand. Look, they brought in all of these trailers here for security and for protection, right? Oh, it gets worse. Hang on.
In public, we spoke to a number of the folks who live here about this visit, this campaign visit, even as police are trying to help this community respond. They had to help build quite a perimeter here. It took manpower, it took time, it took first responders to help secure this space. And it wasn't a frustration or an acceptance of that in town, it's more of an ambivalence. We went downtown where some of the vendors were serving food that would otherwise spoil out on the street side, powering up the generators, getting food to folks who need a good meal. And they said, it's fine if dignitaries, if a former president wants to visit, if they're happy about it, frustrated by it, they're just ambivalent about it. At this moment, in this community in Georgia, they're just trying to get their footing. They want their kids to go back to school. They want their power back on. They want to be able to restore their businesses and restore their buildings.
I wonder how this
the
guy...
presidential campaign visit didn't register so much with so many people here, one way or the other.
Scott McFarland, CBS News. You hadn't heard this yet, right?
No, I had not heard this.
Knowing that you had lived through Katrina and the politics of Katrina as a Republican on Capitol Hill, I'm curious as to your response.
I mean, honestly, the people in these communities would kill for a high-level politician who brings media down there to see what their lives are like, what the devastation has brought. That is, and to have someone, especially when federal services like FEMA are delayed.
Yeah.
It means a lot to them to have, but I love that he describes it as ambivalent, sort of mixed feelings, right?
Yeah.
Because he can't say they're outraged, right? Or they're super supportive. He's got to say they're ambivalent.
Yeah,
you know?
But you know what's interesting about that report? He's a television reporter.
Yeah.
He's there. I mean, this was on his cell phone, but he's got his camera crew.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also got his cell phone with a video camera on it. Clearly, he's putting it out there on social media. And so he says, I talked to people here, and here's what they told me. Where's the video of that?
Right.
I mean, you're literally there as a television reporter to get video, and I would think to interview some of the people. If that happened and if they were ambivalent, why are we hearing you characterize their feelings instead of us being able to actually see what they had to say?
And you know what we didn't hear? How do they feel about the fact that Biden's on vacation and Kamala's, doing some
Did you ask that question? Would you rather have Trump here doing this?
Were they ambivalent about that?
Or would you rather have the federal government representatives who actually have a duly sworn obligation to do something here?
This sort of outrage that a former president has gone there. Let's think about if Obama showed up. You think they'd have this? I mean, they're actually giving him briefings.
Exactly.
And they're
Clinton
clearing.
with the global Clinton Global Initiative showing up there with Hillary.
Do you think they'd have that same kind of I don't think so.
I don't think so either. And let me remind you, that news outlet of that report that you just heard on Donald Trump visiting Valdosta, Georgia, they are the ones who will be serving as the moderators tonight for the vice presidential debate between Tim Walz and J.D. Vance. By the way, you'll hear that right here live on WMAL tonight. It's 5:23. One other thing about Kamala Harris's response, we're getting into this in more detail later, but Dan Crenshaw, Congressman of Texas, former Navy SEAL, he tweeted out this video. I've seen this before. I think this goes to when Kamala Harris was a senator running for president. But Kamala Harris was asked about FEMA and about how the federal government distributes emergency relief. Listen to this.
It is our lowest income communities and our communities of color that are most impacted by these extreme conditions and impacted by by issues that are not of their own making. And so
women.
Absolutely.
And women.
And so we have to address this in a way that is about giving resources based on equity, understanding that we fight for equality, but we also need to fight for equity, understanding not everyone starts out at the same place. And if we want people to be in an equal place, sometimes we have to take into account those disparities and do that work.
All right, so she's talking about how the impact on people of color and women are more severely impacted, so we have to take that into account. This is in the context of FEMA disaster aid and utilize equity in how that money's. And, of course, Western North Carolina is rural Appalachia, mostly white people, although, ironically, Asheville is actually sort of a more affluent community there. But fascinating.
Yes.
Fascinating.
Some are more deserving. Larry.
Right. I mean,
hurricanes
hurt everyone, but they hurt some people worse. And so when it's time to distribute FEMA aid, we got to take that into account.
That's right. That's right.
And I'm not saying that that's what's actually animating what appears to be a less than stellar response from FEMA so far, based on reports.
It is.
But knowing that that's what her philosophy is.
Well, and we can talk about this later too. But if you look at FEMA's goals this year, I mean, their whole mission statement, it's all about equity.
Coming up, Tim Walz is a big old liar. You already knew that. But here on the eve of his big debut as the vice presidential candidate in tonight's debate, he's been caught in a whopper. And we'll give you the details next.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station.
Making sense of the news.
News Talk 105.9.
News now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
5:36 on O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in here. Coming up at 6:35, Alana Goodman, senior investigative reporter for the Washington Free Beacon, is going to join us about, a topic we're going to get to in about, 30 seconds. 7:05, Grover Norquist, Americans for Tax Reform. 7:35, Beverly Hallberg will join us. She's actually not too far from the damage in North Carolina. We're going to get a firsthand account from her. And then at 8:05, Corey Lewandowski from the Trump campaign. That's Julie Gunlock, isn't it?
Good morning.
I know you. I've
Good
seen
morning.
you before. I'm Larry O'Connor. Let's talk about Tim Walz, shall we? And let's face it, we're pretty used to his lies, right? We've been pretty well versed in his lies, what with the claiming he was a command sergeant major when
That's
he
right.
wasn't.
No.
Claiming that he was in combat
That's
when
right.
he wasn't.
That he carried a weapon of war in combat.
Which he didn't. Claiming that he was on a tarmac in Fallujah, I believe it was, while he was watching soldiers coffins being placed onto the planes. Which
That's
he
right.
did. On and on. He claims he's a football coach when he was actually the assistant defensive coordinator.
Right.
He's claimed a lot of things.
Yes.
But listen to this one. This is hold on. What year was this? I believe this was 2014. Is that right? Stand by. This is from a 2014 congressional hearing when he was a congressman for his district in Minnesota, and he made this claim.
As a young man, I was just going going to teach high school in Fosan in Guangdong, and was in Hong Kong in May of '89. And as the events were unfolding, several of us went in, and I still remember the train station in Hong Kong. It was a large number, especially European, I think, very angry that we would still go after what had happened. But it was my belief at that time that the diplomacy was going to happen on many levels, certainly people to people, and the opportunity to be in a Chinese high school at that critical time seemed to me to be really important. And it was a very interesting summer, to say the least, because if you recall, as we moved in that summer and further on, and the news blackouts and things that went on, you certainly can't black out news from people if they want to get it. And I can still clearly remember the fall when the Berlin Wall fell and what was happening.
All right, so he was referring to the events of Tiananmen Square.
Yes.
And that he was in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square, massacre. Really,
Yes.
what ended up happening there was a massacre at the hands of the Chinese totalitarians who don't like free speech. Let that be a warning to all of us. Here's the problem with that. And the detail there. I can still remember being in the train station and Europeans angry that we were there and all this stuff, right? This is, it's a lie.
Yes.
All
it
of
is.
this is a lie. Alana Goodman at Washington Free Beacon has been investigating this, and I will read you specifically what she has said here. Contemporaneous news reports show that Walz was touring a National Guard storeroom in Alliance, Nebraska in May of 1989. They indicate that Walz did not leave the United States until August of that year, at least 2 months after the student protests ended with the Tiananmen Square massacre. In fact, there's a newspaper clipping from Nebraska that shows a young Tim Walz in his uniform, specifically at the time of it's dated. You can actually see the clipping has the date, May 16th, 1989.
Yeah, what's interesting is this anecdote that he has said has been repeated without scrutiny. And again, this is her reporting. She reports that this has been repeated without scrutiny by the New York Times, CBS
Everyone
News,
accepts
and National
it as
Public.
fact. Yeah.
Yes, everyone accepts. This is how you build this reputation, right? And if nobody checks your lies, and this is the great danger of having a sort of corporate media that doesn't check facts, doesn't care. Thank God for the Free Beacon and reporters
actual
like Alana.
investigative journalism. Free Beacon
Yes.
has not only done this. Free Beacon has looked into the doctorate theses that have been written by these Harvard presidents and found all the plagiarism. Nobody else looked into that.
Right.
Nobody. I mean, it's like
They have done incredible
there's
work. over the
actual
last couple
investigative
years. Yes.
reporting going on at the
Yes.
Washington Free Beacon, and they get they get the Dow Prize. The Dow Prize is an
Yes,
investigative
absolutely.
journalism award that's been created by the National Journalism Center, of which I sit on the board over at Young America's Foundation, and we are awarding real investigative journalism, unlike the Pulitzers, who don't care. It's propaganda what they reward. Can I just? But this latest lie, and with the detail, that's what freaks me out. When people lie with that kind of detail, I vividly remember sitting.
I
in
remember the smells.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
So weird.
And here's this newspaper account that specifically shows him not there in any way whatsoever. Scott Jennings on CNN. I don't suggest that you watch CNN, but if there's a reason to watch right now, Scott Jennings, formerly of the Bush administration, a Republican commentator, has been fantastic. I want you to listen to what he had to say about Tim Walz.
Second of all, Walz is a buffoon. I'm sorry. This guy, he's the only school teacher in America who brags that none of his students can get into an Ivy League school. He's had one consequential press interaction with our Dana Bash, who asked him about the fabrications in his own resume, and his answer was essentially, me no understand words good. I mean, he's a buffoon. He's on a free ride for running under Harris. He gets very complicated.
Yeah, that's my favorite part. The woman on the panel, Scott. We don't stoop to name calling. Now let's talk about Orange Hitler, okay?
Be polite.
Yeah, there's a little bit more on Tim Walz, and
Me no speak
English. Good. Well, it's true. It's like I don't have the best grammar all the time.
Scott Jennings is fabulous.
Yeah,
he really is.
A little bit more on this lie, this latest lie from Tim Walz, again, especially in previewing the fact that, will this come up at the debate tonight? Will any of the moderators say, well, Governor Walz, we've got another instance. Can you care to explain this? Were you there in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square massacre or not? Because you've been saying that you were, and now we have pictures of you dated in Nebraska at the time.
And also ask about the fact that he lied about his record in combat.
Right,
I mean,
right.
and not this Dana Bash. I will never say Dana. Dana. I will never say it right.
Here's the bet. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying her sort of, you want to explain that?
Want to explain that to me? No, the Dana Bash version is, now, did you say that because of A, because of B, or because of C? I'm going to give you the answers. You pick which one you want, which one you think sounds best. The bet tonight is what'll come up first? Any one of Tim Walz's lies, and there's a whole lot you can pick from, or eating cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio.
I have an idea. I think it might be that J.D. Vance might have exaggerated how many eggs his children are eating, which is a whole nother issue.
Tim Walz, more on Tim Walz in a moment, and a new revelation that might explain why Kamala Harris picked Tim Walz in the first place. We'll give you that in a moment. It's 5:44.
As a young man, I was just going to teach high school in Fosan in Guangdong, and was in Hong Kong in May of '89, and
that's just a lie. And thanks to the great reporting from Alana Goodman, who's going to be joining us at 6:35 to talk about this report. He was not. He was in Nebraska in 1989. He was not in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square massacre. That's Tim Walz, yet another lie. We're giving you a preview of tonight's vice presidential debate. The View approached their version of the previewing the vice presidential debate a little bit differently than we do.
Right. I want to see Coach Tim Walz ask J.D. Vance, are Haitian people really eating pets? Do you really believe that?
By the way, I would love to see the candidates ask each other questions, too. But the way Democrats set up these debates, they like to inject their own little sock puppets there instead and have people from the mainstream, propaganda, liberal journalism. In this case, it'll be Norah O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan from Face the Nation.
Oh, gosh.
They're going to be the two so-called moderators at CBS News Propaganda. But people looking at this Tim Walz thing, it's like, what the hell happened here? Why, in fact, is he even the running? What was Kamala Harris thinking, right? I assume that they thought, well, we got to get a white man. We know that. They wanted a white man. And Josh Shapiro was too Jewish, not the right kind of white.
Right.
So yesterday, Kamala Harris, this must have been taped over the weekend or something, but she appeared on a podcast with two former NBA
this is
players.
So uncomfortable.
It's an incredibly cringe thing, and we'll get to some of the audio later. But this one particular moment here, she was asked specifically, well, after you found out Joe Biden was removing himself from the ticket, what did you do?
Look, from the time that the president called me and told me he wasn't running, I mean, it just like everything was in speedy motion. And I was not sleeping so well. And that one morning, I had, a few hours sleep. And I like to sleep. Mm-hmm. I just got up, and so I just went out and got a pork roast and started marinating. Mm-hmm. But I just got up and started, everybody's asleep, I just got up and started cooking. Mm-hmm.
It was a Sunday, so here, I'll give you a little too much information. My family was staying with us.
By the way, we have now switched in this video to the CNN interview with Dana Bash, where she told a little bit of a different story.
And including my baby nieces. And we had just had pancakes and, Auntie, can I have more bacon? Yes, I'll make you more bacon. And then...
So it's two cooking stories. The first one is that everybody was asleep. She couldn't sleep, and she went and marinated a pork roast. But the other story she told is that she made everybody breakfast. But either way, if you take the pork roast story, she said that she couldn't sleep. She was having trouble sleeping. She had insomnia. And according to this, that's when she was making the decision about Tim Walz as her running mate. So the headline at the New York Post, Kamala Harris says insomnia hit after Biden dropped out and was sleep deprived the day of the Walz pick.
Yes.
So
we know a little bit about being sleep deprived.
Well,
Larry,
exactly. And let's face it, we don't always make the best decisions here in our 4 hours every morning. But it's nothing so consequential as who will be one heartbeat away from the presidency. So she tells the story about how she was having trouble sleeping and she was racked with insomnia. And she was sleep deprived on the very day that she had to make her final decision on her running mate. So she said, I don't know, let's just go with Tim Walz.
Yeah, exactly. I got to get it back to
that
this
pork roast is not sitting well with me right now. I don't know what I put in that marinade, but and that's how we got Tim Walz.
That is fascinating.
As the running mate, if you believe any of her stories.
Well, what's
and of
interesting
course, there's no
is
reason to believe any of them.
I do think Kamala probably realized she has a bit of a relatability gap that people just can't relate to her, and she comes off inauthentic. And Tim Walz, that was his strength. And now that we realize he's a habitual liar.
Right.
And that folksy, it's all a lie. It's all pretend.
Right. The entire
and this
persona.
I'm patriotic. I served my country, but I'm a Democrat. I mean, it's all kind of it's all cosplay.
Hey. Mind your own damn business. All right. That's the golden rule here in Minnesota. Alana Goodman is going to be joining us coming up at 6:35. Talk about this investigative report in the Free Beacon exposing yet another Tim Walz lie that you won't hear about in the debate tonight, but you will hear the debate right here on WMAL 553.